We are here with a special guest, but this is America's Heroes Group Roundtable live stream digital media show. And today is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. And October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I am your host, U.S. Army Flight Surgeon and Iraq Combat Medic, Colonel Dr. Damon Arnold. And I have someone with me. When I first started reading his stuff, I couldn't put his bio down. I couldn't even go to sleep because there was so much energy just in his bio. I was like, is this man real? Because, but I have him on with my, I'm a partner for this presentation with the African Diaspora Association of Public Health Professionals, LLC. But Eldridge Johnson, I'm going to start going back because he gave me a history of, how he was, born in Helena, Arkansas. And I started reading that. And he just exploded onto the scene. He actually got his BA from Chicago State University and a Master's of Military History from the Air Warfare and American Military University. And I'm going to, his military education includes Squadron Officer School, Air Command and Staff College, and Air War College. He received his Master's of Military History degree in the late summer of 2002. Sorry. So he actually entered the military as a Vietnam veteran. And he was a mechanic, an aircraft mechanic. He soloed while he was in high school in a Piper Cub. And then he comes back and decides, I'm going to become a helicopter pilot. And I'm going back to Vietnam for another tour. He goes back to Vietnam. And this man comes back to the United States and then decides that he wants to go into the Air Force from the Army. He ends up flying F-16s. I'm like, I have no idea of how you even make that transition to go from that to that. That is a hero. That's why I'm so happy to have him on the show. He also worked for United Airlines, where he flew many different planes, 777, 776s. He became a captain of a 747. I remember when those first came out. I was old enough to remember that. But he has been in 50, he's been to all 50 states and all 7 continents, spoke to people in 5 different languages on board the aircraft. And I'm like, is this guy human? Because then he came back, he gets a boat, he goes across Lake Michigan back and forth. He gets his certification in scuba diving, his certification in air balloons, his certification in the drones. He gets his certification in fixed wing airplanes, but I'm looking at this guy going like, when did he ever sleep? I can't even imagine him ever having slept. I am so proud of him. He came in a time where it was very difficult, if not impossible, for an African American to achieve the things that he has done. He's a national hero. He has historic lifetime military achievements and a Smithsonian National Museum honor. He has his photograph in there. He worked at the Pentagon. He has worked on security issues for weapon systems. I'm like, this man, I had a conversation with him. He blew my mind for an hour about all the IT technology and how the world is being transformed. I was just sitting there going like, wow, the depth of knowledge that this man has. So without further ado, I want to say hello, Eldridge. and he left the military as a lieutenant colonel. So he even went from I'm not sure if he went when he went into Vietnam, it was probably one stripe, and went all the way up to lieutenant colonel. But very, very proud of this man, as a nation should be. So, how are you doing tonight, Eldridge?
Well, well, sir, thank you very much. I'm very humble with that introduction. I don't, I, I, I'm very humble, and
Oh, you're a very humble
I,
person.
by
I
the
have to tell everyone when I was talking to
introduction.
him about these things, he was like, "Yeah, I did that," and I was like, "You did what?" To us, it's like you're kidding me. But to you, you're very, very humble. I know Maurice Bridges, who is our VFW state commander, has very high regard for you. And he said, you have got to talk to this guy. You have got to interview him. Maurice was on with Eugene Blackwell, who's the senior vice commander for the state for VFW.
Mhm.
And the two of them were like, Eugene is like in awe. When I started talking to him about you, he was like, what? I felt like I was standing still in my life when I hear all the things that you did. So let's start with some questions.
Okay,
Why and how did you join the military? You can go and tell that story a little bit more intimately, because it's amazing. You know,
okay. Well, to begin, I was in high school, and I grew up in the projects in on the west side of Chicago,
yeah.
and so I elected to finish high school uh, in the evening. So I picked up a job in the daytime, working for the phone company installing telephones for at that time Illinois Bell telephone.
Ah.
So it happens that at the time the war was kind of advancing and getting into a more mature age of the war, and um, they started drafting people, and I got a draft notice, and I happened to be installing this military recruiters, this army recruiters telephone. So I told him, I says, I got a draft notice. So what are the procedures for this? Do I have any options? He says, well, if you take an extra year, if you volunteer, then you won't go to Vietnam. I
Hmm.
says, well, okay, I'm all in for that because I didn't know much about Vietnam, but I could see on television that it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Wasn't
a,
a pleasant place.
yeah, yeah. So I did that.
Mhm.
I signed up, and I qualified to be your aircraft mechanic, even though I wanted to fly helicopters. I says, oh, I'd like to do that.
Mhm.
And and he says, well, your scores aren't high enough, so you can maybe try down the line, but no. But I did qualify for aircraft mechanics, so I went in, trained for that, finished that course, and I went straight to Vietnam. So the uh, the recruiter, so I I went looking for him, and the office was moved, but I didn't look for him until after I came back from Vietnam. Um,
Yeah.
so I went to Vietnam and did my duty there, and uh, I was the only uh, uh, black mechanic in the outfit there. There was there were other blacks, but they were doing other things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, I soon began to get the hang of things, and I went over it as you said as a private E E1 E2. I think it was E2, private E2. And by the time I left, I was what they call a specialist five or E5, like a
Mhm.
sergeant, the lowest sergeant. But during that time, I learned a
Mhm.
lot, and I was a very meticulous person at that time. going through high school, I was kind of a knucklehead. I didn't live up to my potential.
Mm.
It was kind of like, okay, what do I need this for? What do I need that for? But I still learned some things.
Mm.
And the thing that I learned was to, and this was drilled in from my mom that raised my brother and I, is that if you're going to do something, you should give it all your all. You should do your
Mm.
best, and that was instilled. And then education was drilled in us because um, my mom, she I think she didn't start ninth grade because in the South, what took priority were the cotton fields,
Mm.
and my grandfather didn't see much value in education. So, come cotton season, they had to leave school and go pick cotton for $1 a day, whatever that was. And so she emphasized education, the education that she didn't get. Uh, Moving on, the only person that seemed to be doing well was my uncle who left for the service, for the Air Force. And he was in the Air Force as an aircraft mechanic. So I says, "Oh, okay, that's why I came up with the idea to become a aircraft mechanic." Over there, I was hoping to be promoted to crew chief on the aircraft. That's a person that flies with the aircraft and monitors the aircraft systems. If something breaks, you can repair it, or you can develop a workaround. Um, so I did that. Uh, I I became so I made myself valuable as far as fixing items and mechanical systems,
Mm.
and such that they wanted me to train people, but I was
Mm.
not yet a crew chief. So I've trained people to be crew chief, but I never became a crew chief myself until people were killed, and you're automatically
Oof.
promoted and
Promoted.
given an opportunity because,
Wow.
yeah. So what happened was, there was a sergeant in charge of me who who discouraged me from uh, either uh, becoming a pilot
Mm.
or or actually blocked me from being crew chief.
Mm.
And he figured that he would look good to the pilots if he treated me bad.
Mm.
So so if he treated me bad, he would look good to the pilots, and he can kind of buddy around with the
Wow.
pilots. And it was my good fortune that he was trying to do that because he saved my life twice. He,
Mm.
I trained one guy to be, actually, I trained two guys to be crew chiefs, and they got the ship that I trained them on, and they went
Mm.
out and they got shot down, and both of them were killed.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, so that's the first time he saved my life by trying to give me the shaft, and the second time I trained a cook. Now
Mhm.
keep in mind I'm the only black crew chief. I trained a cook, and he was Caucasian, and the other two guys were Caucasian also.
Mhm.
That got killed. The pilot got 90% of his body burned, and they were shipped to Japan to the burn center.
Oh
The
boy.
cook that was that became crew chief that I trained, they gave the ship that I trained him on to him. Uh, 7 people were killed in that, including the guy I trained. So twice this guy saved my life by
Wow.
trying to give me the shaft. Okay. So I went somewhere else. I found it was a testing center in Vietnam. So I went to that base and
Right.
retook the pilot test. I passed it,
Yes.
and so I came back to the States, and uh, I I went to flight school.
Yeah.
Okay, to make a long story short,
Where was
and
that? Where was the flight school at?
the flight school was in Fort Walters, Texas. It's
Texas. Okay.
Mineral Wells, Texas. It's called
Mhm,
Fort Walters, and
mhm.
it's primary. Uh, it's a primary flight screening. So if you pass the primary uh, and the advanced, then they send you to Fort Rucker for the finishing. Okay, for
Yes.
the turbine helicopters.
Right.
So I went there and to Fort Walters, and I was already experienced crew chief. And keep in mind, I had flown a Piper Cub before, so flying wasn't a big deal. The
Yeah.
helicopter was a big deal for me, but it still wasn't intimidating to me.
Right.
And so I did very well with the academics. Um, there were a lot of people that quit the first day because you have these TAC officers like screaming in your ear and convincing people the first day
To
that you
quit.
need to quit. you know, so 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 I went through that thing, and then um, and something funny happened because I was the only black in my class,
Ah.
and so
Yes.
uh, and I could feel that the TAC officer. Sometimes you can feel people when they're a certain way just by the
Yes.
way they talk to you.
Mhm.
Well, he would make a long story short. They have these inspections every day, and you got to bounce a quarter and do all this stuff and clean your lockers,
Yes.
and you got to notch your shoes, and you wear two notches one day and you wear one notch the other day. They want to make sure you're rotating your shoes, that you don't just have a display pair of shoes and all this stuff. So it's interesting. It's
Yeah.
very disciplined atmosphere, and you
Mhm.
march everywhere you go, and you got to eat a square meal and show your hands and all this stuff.
Right.
But I had two roommates, and of course I was the only black. And my one roommate had never seen a black person in real life. He only
Oh,
saw black people on television. So he says,
wow.
"Ah, from Nebraska." I says, "Oh, okay, you know." So we got along, and none of us did very well. I mean, they inspected us, and we got demerits, and so you give a pink slip. And so I got like, I don't know, two or three pink slips. So everybody in the room got two or three pink slips. The other two guys did too.
Right.
Then one day they told me I had to leave, so I left.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
so when you're coming into the process to become a warrant officer candidate, because this is what you get when you graduate. You're a warrant officer. You're a warrant officer one
Yeah.
when you graduate and get your officer and your wings.
Yes.
Well, when you're waiting to get to start this class, you're in the snowbirds. So you're waiting for your class to start. But when you wash out of the program, you're in the blackbirds.
Ah,
So they told me, "Oh, you're shipping the blackbirds because you have X amount of pink slips." So I'm in blackbirds, and I'm saying my roommates had the same amount of pink slips as I had. Why aren't they here? And the population of blackbirds were mostly black men.
ah,
Man, this is wrong. So I'm talking to
wow.
this one guy. He was he wanted to fly, even though he maxed the he could have gone to West Point, but he opted to come to flight school.
Ah,
And so I go to the IG, the Inspector General. This is a person that, well, for people, I don't know your audience, but this is a
what?
person who's in
Mhm,
charge of making things fair for everyone. Okay.
mhm.
So I went there, and this guy tells me, he says, well, I says, I think I'm being treated unfairly. Are you saying you're being discriminated against? Well, I don't know, but this isn't right. And they
Mhm.
had me set up for a not a court martial, but a flight evaluation board, similar to a legal proceedings to take you out of the program. So so I said, okay. He says, why don't you let the process take place? So I did. I let the process take place, and in the
Mhm.
meantime, waiting for the process to take place, I went back to
Mhm.
where they were training, and I asked the other two guys, my roommates, why aren't you guys? What's up? Oh yeah, well, the tech officer. I was cleaning the office where the tech officer resides. He worked. There's a wing. You have rooms, and everybody's in bunk beds. And at the end of the hall is the tech officer's office. And so he was cleaning up the tech officer's office, and he says, "I found my pink slips torn up in the waste basket." And they replaced his pink slips with white slips. The other two roommates of mine. And I said, "Well, can I see those?" And he gave them to me, and I pieced them together. I taped them together, and I took them to, at that time, I guess they had like Xerox machines, and I made copies of them. So I went through the process. I went through, and at the hearing, there were all kinds of stories that I was doing this and I was doing that.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
so uh, I even had a bathroom plunger because some of the guys couldn't figure out how helicopters hover, this and that. So I would take the classroom book, cut the instruments out, and show them, oh, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. Now,
Oh.
so 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 I was kind of trying to help everybody, and yet I'm the one that's out. So I went through the kangaroo court process. Then I went back to the IG, and the IG happened to be um, uh, 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 he happened to be a black major,
Mm.
and he says, "Well, son, it's kind of hard to prove discrimination and this and that." And I said, "Well, what about this?" And I showed him my puzzle, my jigsaw puzzle that I put together, and I says, "They replaced my pink slips, and they replaced my roommate's pink slips with white slips,
Mhm.
and they weren't eliminated, and I was." "Well, you have
Yeah.
proof?" Well, I showed him the proof. And he asked me, he says, "Well, I got two questions for you." He says,
Mhm.
"Do you want to go back to the same squadron where you were training? Or do you want to start in another class?" I says, "Another class." And so there was a change of command ceremony where I was trained initially. So those TAC officers were relieved of duty.
Mhm.
And so that is, and from then on, I had like a bullseye on me. I go to the cleaners to pick up my clothes.
Oh boy.
That's the guy. That's the guy.
Hmm.
It was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's like parallel to the civil rights movement. I mean, the things that you had to go through.
Oh yeah.
Um, I mean, that's a really incredible, dramatic story. We're running out of time, but
Uh-huh.
I want you to come back. I was letting you speak because I have a hook in here. I wanted you to come back for another show. You have much more to talk talk about.
Oh,
Um, but
well, yeah.
and you were,
Sure.
you were to become a captain of a 747. I have no idea of what it takes.
Well,
And
I apologize for going
no,
deep,
do not
but
apologize. This was absolutely, people need to hear this story.
well, but the yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's something that I think that I don't know what it made me a stronger person because they couldn't get me out academically because I had a 96 they couldn't change the papers. We took our test in the open, so they couldn't change those. So they tried to get me out on flight, and
Wow.
that's another story, and but it paid off. So it turned out to be, it was a lemon, but it turned out to be lemonade.
Yes. Okay, Eldridge, you are coming back on.
Okay.
I want you to agree so they don't think I'm coercing you.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But
yeah. Yeah. I guess this is first time I've actually told the story
wow.
to more than one person.
Wow.
So, but it can be long, and I guess I can be windy. So
No, that was fantastic.